Wow, such music for my in-person debut. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad you've joined us both here in the sanctuary and on Zoom. I'm Susie Maslow, the worship associate for today. And with me are Reverend Lucy Bunch and our lovely pianist, Irina Chancheva, and our soon-to-be ordained minister, Sanjay Hawk. Reverend Roger is away until August 1st. We are coming to you live from our sanctuary on our church campus with a number of people here in attendance. And this being our first month of Zoom services from the sanctuary, we're asking that you please be patient as we get familiar with the technology. And our tech wizards in the back are Dirk Tuel, Ivan Caballero, and Colleen Emress. And we couldn't do it without them. And if you are new to us, we are glad you're here this morning. And if you would like to get connected and receive our weekly messages, please fill out our newcomer form at uuss.org/newcomers. You can see this address if you're online in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Our online greeter today is Judy Lane. If you type "I'm new" in the chat box, Judy will respond with a private message and help you get oriented to the congregation. Wellspring Wednesday is a gathering for fun, learning, and connection. The fourth Wednesday of the month is for exploring Unitarian Universalism. This week, join Reverend Lucy in a presentation on our principles and sources this Wednesday at 7 p.m. in this same virtual space. To find out everything that is going on in this coming week, go to UUSS.org to check out our weekly message and online calendar. If you would like to be part of our studio audience in August, please check our website or call the church office. Our goal is to return to in-person services on the second week of September, but we will continue to broadcast on Zoom as well. Finally, don't forget our all-church gathering on our campus this Saturday, July 31st at 10 in the morning until noon. We will dedicate our patio cover, play some games, and celebrate being together. Everyone is welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. It's so wonderful to see everyone here, especially those who are online. And as you know, I'm Sanjay Hawk, the soon-to-be ordained minister by this congregation. And I would like to share with you today a chalice lighting that comes from the pink hymnal, Lifting Our Voices, Readings in the Living Tradition, number 142. Let us be united. Let us speak in harmony. Let our minds apprehend alike. Common be our prayer. Common be the end of our assembly. Common be our resolution. Common be our deliberations. Alike be our feelings, unified be our hearts. Common be our intentions. Perfect be our unity.
Let us rise in body or spirit and sing together, We Give Thanks. And here comes Celia to join us. So Celia and I have to be on either sides of the mic so that people can hear us clearly on Zoom. So that's why I asked her to move, part of our learning process. This is the time in our service when we bring our joys and our sorrows, our worries, our griefs and our gratitudes into this beloved community. If you would like to tell this community what's on your heart this morning, please open your chat box at the bottom of your screen and type in what it is that you would like to share. Those of you in the sanctuary are free to share among yourselves, greet each other, or listen to another beautiful piece of music by Arena. Thank you for sharing your joys and sorrows with this community. And I'm sure on our hearts this morning, amidst the joys and the sorrows, is the profound sense of uncertainty of the times that we're living in right now. So let us come together in prayer this morning as a community of love and care and center ourselves to build our resilience during these challenging times. So let's start by breathing together 3 times, slow and deep, if that works for you. I always do 4 counts on the in-breath and 4 counts on the out-breath. And it's been shown that it really only takes 3 breaths to center you and calm you if you're feeling stressed or anxious. So let's do 3 breaths together. Breathe in 4, breathe out 4. And let's do one more and breathe out with a sigh. Ah, oh, so nice. So this morning, as a caring community, the lovely caring community that we are, I'm proposing that we extend our love and compassion out this morning to those who need our care and concern. So I'm going to do a litany of people and things in our world that need our care and concern. And then I'm going to give us a few minutes of silence, more than normal, for you to just be present with whoever is on your heart, whatever is on your heart. So you may consider offering your care and concern to any of the following: those who are mourning the losses of loved ones, those who are sick and dying and their families, those who are unsheltered, our earth and all the creatures who are suffering from the effects of human damage to climate, all of those in war zones or refugees who have lost their homeland, those struggling with mental illness or drug addiction, any among us who need our love and care. Let us breathe together in the silence and hold all this in our hearts. Let us pray. Holy Spirit, we give thanks for the gifts that we have been given and for the gift of our ability to love and care, and for the gift of the ability to take action in this world, however small or big we are called. Spirit of life, which rejuvenates and encourages us, send us the fresh winds of possibility to blow away our worries and restore our spirits. Help us to step forward into the future with love at the center of our beings. Give us the courage to use our gifts to help heal this broken world. So may it be. Blessed be. We're going to sing together number 83, Winds Be Still. You can remain seated. I love it so much, singing together. Thank you. So our sermon topic today is witch hunts then and now. And one of the most famous witch hunts in our country took place in the 17th century in Salem, Massachusetts. This article is from the New York Times, November 26, 2019. The author is Stacy Schiff, who wrote the book, The Witches, Suspicion, Betrayal, and Hysteria in 1692 Salem. The title of this piece is, What a Witch Hunt Really Looks Like. How does truth win out in a world afire with falsehood? Or put differently, where does delusion go to die? Let's take a random example from early American history. Let's say you happen to find yourself in the midst of a witch hunt. I mean, a real witch hunt, where people testify to crimes invisible to others and bordering on the preposterous, before a court that prefers imaginary deeds to actual evidence and that aggressively executes innocence. The kind that might leave the inhabitants of 24 towns cowering in fear, worrying that the next knock will land on their doors, in which there is as much recycling of ancient envy, antipathy, and insecurity as there are reports of flying cups and translucent cats. The kind in which, as was the case with the Salem witch trials, which consumed eastern Massachusetts in 1692, the only effective way to avoid an accusation is to point a finger oneself. It is unclear who first spoke out against the actual single greatest witch hunt in American history, but among the first was a 34-year-old merchant named Thomas Brattle. Brattle had a number of advantages. He was the son of one of the richest men in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Having spent several years in London, he had seen more of the world than most New Englanders. He was well-versed in the sciences. He knew all the men at the uppermost reaches of power, but had no family ties to the administration. He had no constituency. He did have a conscience. He came forward of his own volition for the sake of two victims who could not speak for themselves, the public good and the historical record. Brattle had observed the trials. He seems to have attended at least one hanging. He fully knew the danger of speaking out. He also anticipated the price that New England would pay for the irregular proceedings. I am afraid, he explained, that ages will not wear off that reproach and those stains which these things will leave behind on our land. By the time he sat down to register his concerns, 20 people had been executed for witchcraft, and 7 more awaited hanging. 50 additional prisoners had confessed, many of them to flying through the air and to signing pacts with the devil in blood. Brattle wrote anonymously, affixing only his initials to his pages, and he did so for good reason. Over the previous months, those who had raised questions about the trials had been rewarded with witchcraft accusations. Point by point, Brattle dismantled the untruths that we acknowledge so effortlessly today, but that eluded the Massachusetts colonists in 1692. If fantastical accusations were to be admitted in court, would liberty not evaporate overnight? The court believed that they were eradicating dark invaders who plotted against them. Meanwhile, false testimony had been extracted from the most pious of New Englanders. 3 weeks after Brattle committed his thoughts to prayer, the Salem Witch Court disbanded. The belief in witchcraft would persist for some time, but there would be no additional accusations, no further convictions. How would anyone look back upon these things, Brattle asked, without the greatest of sorrow and grief imaginable? He feared that Salem's reign of terror would leave a lasting blot on the record. Sometimes delusions crumble slowly. Sometimes they abate only provisionally. The earth was round for several centuries before it went flat for many more. But we have no witchcraft epidemics since Thomas Brattle's time. By definition, you do not qualify as the victim of a witch hunt if you are the most powerful man on the planet. You do, however, incite a witch hunt when you spew malignant accusations and reckless insinuations, when you broadcast a fictitious narrative, attack those who resist it, and charge your critics with shadowy, sinister plots to destroy you. What could have possessed that benighted 1692 administration, we ask today? They did as well, shuddering afterwards at what they had wrought. The guilt proved crushing. You can walk gutlessly through history behind a deluded man, holding tight to your ridiculous narrative. Or you can follow the lead of Thomas Brattle, in which case someone will be extolling your heroism 327 years from now.
It seems to me that it's quite easy to judge people, to make up stories about people I see who I don't know. How easy to label someone as evil or ignorant. Our first UU principle to respect the inherent worth and dignity of all persons at times seems to me to be the hardest. Jackson, where I live, is a fairly conservative area. In my daily travels, I often drive past and wait for the traffic light in front of a small store that sells flags, their bright colors dancing in the wind. As I'm held captive by the traffic light, their right-wing and regressive messages seem to shout at me. Depending on my state of mind, I might glare at the store, wondering if there might be some sneaky way that I can bomb the place. When I'm more in touch with my inner Buddha, I muse about the people working and shopping there. What are they thinking? Wondering what's in their hearts. Would they talk to me, explain their philosophy? Would I listen? About that time, the light turns green and off I go, still wondering. I find most of Amador County residents to be quite friendly and have met a number of neighbors and strangers while out in nature. This past spring, walking along the McCollum River bird watching, a gentleman and his wife stopped their pickup to chat about what I was looking at through the binoculars. An eagle. I offered the glasses for their enjoyment. We were all excited by the close-up sighting and chatted for a few minutes about bird-related topics. We bid each other have a great day. They drove off, revealing their Trump bumper sticker. Ha! A smile spread across my face. Nature lovers sit on many sides of the fence, I guess. I wondered if our exchange would have differed if I'd seen their bumper sticker first. We UUs are a great bunch, and I love hanging out with my people. Sometimes even my people can demonize others unfairly. I was recently disheartened when one of my politically and socially active UU friends announced on Facebook that she would no longer be friends with anyone who voted for Trump. She listed a number of reasons. I was shocked. How could this loving person so coldly cut people out of her life? Aren't we all more than just our political actions? I can't imagine cutting out my favorite conservatives, my son and my two brothers. We just have chosen not to discuss politics most of the time. Over the past year, I've listened to several talks and presentations by Valerie Carr, California born and bred lawyer and social justice activist. A Sikh, Carr has endured racist hatred, including the murder of a dear family friend. You may have seen her TED Talk. If not, it's really wonderful. She's known for promoting something called revolutionary love. Can we see the other as our brother, our mother, a cousin? And when we look at those we might consider other in this way, we can be more loving, more compassionate. She encourages us to look at others and think, you are a part of me I do not yet know, and to wonder. It's not easy. It's so easy to blame and shame people, to label them for their weight, for their addictions, for their homelessness. The list can go on and on. But the challenge is to look beyond the surface, to look at the whole person. No one is just the way they look or speak or vote. Like any habit, it just takes the desire to change and practice. And for me, I know sometimes lots and lots of practice. Thank you.
And practice is what makes us unique. Generosity is a practice, a spiritual practice. And we UUs are very good at being generous. Our faith calls us to do this, to make a difference in the world through these gifts of generosity. And one of the ways that we live into this faith is by sharing half of today's offering with an organization that works to heal the world. Our community partner this month of July is the Del Oro Caregiver Resource Center, an independent nonprofit program which offers free services to unpaid family caregivers. Please give generously in support of this important and much needed organization. On the slide, you can see ways you may contribute electronically or mailing a check, PayPal, or the website. The easiest way, though, is to use your phone. And I know you've been dying to use your phone since you got here. So pick it up and text your donation right now to the number on the screen. There's a first-time setup if you haven't done it before, but once you do it, you're set for every Sunday. So text, please. And for those of you in the sanctuary this morning, I know you want to use your phone, so please text. And if not, please, there's a basket at the by the door that you can drop in your offering. Del Oro's mission is to improve the well-being of family caregivers and provide support throughout the caregiving process. One of our mottos is caring for families who care. They have a broad focus on all adult onset brain impairments and their services, and they try to address unique situations for caring for someone experiencing cognitive change and decline. We're proud of our connection to this important organization and hope that you will give generously. I was a caregiver to my mother who had Alzheimer's and to my mother-in-law who also experienced cognitive impairment from chemotherapy. So it is wonderful that there is a place to go to be supported. Without that, it can feel so alone. So please give generously. And now, recite with me at home or here our unison response to giving of the offering. May the spirit of gratitude bless and multiply all that we have, all that we give, and all that we may receive. Thank you.
Clearly. This is my first sermon in 6 weeks, and I get to do it in person, and I am happy. So let's see what comes out of my mouth this morning. There's a quote that's attributed to the philosopher George Santayana. He said, "Those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it." In my lifetime, I've come to think that even if we do remember our history, we're still doomed to repeat it. That's because it seems that some of the least positive aspects of human nature really don't seem to change. Our review of history is often full of hubris and humility, which gets in the way of and lack of humility, which gets in the way of us learning from it. We can look at horrific events in the past and say, oh, we're not like that anymore. We've evolved. These are different times. But we are doomed to repeat things because there are some fundamental qualities of humans that really don't seem to change. They just find other avenues of expression. I like to hope we're less brutal, a bit more compassionate than in the past, and history does show that we are. In most countries, they don't burn people at the stake or lynch them in the town square for witchcraft anymore, but not in all countries. Of course, now, in the developed countries, we use social media for our witch burnings. I do hope that as humans, we learn some lessons at each iteration of a historical pattern. And perhaps we do if you take the long view, which is really the point of this sermon, to help us be aware of how some elements of witch hunts are functioning in our world right now, even though they are not as obvious or as brutal. During my sabbatical 2 years ago, I took a course on witches at UC Davis. It's one that I knew of when I'd worked there, and I'd always been intrigued by the topic. And I was on sabbatical, so hey, let's learn about witches. About halfway through the course, I realized there was a sermon waiting to be given. In fact, many sermons. That there was a lot we could learn from understanding the motivations of the people that were inciting the witch burnings. And I came to appreciate that the great witch burnings teach us so much about human nature. So let's go back a few hundred years to Central Europe and see what we can learn that is relevant for us today. The European witch persecutions began in the 15th century and lasted until the mid-18th century. That's 1750 or so. This era has been studied a lot. More recently, female scholars have brought a feminist perspective on this time. There are widely different estimates of how many people died in the witch hunts. Scholars have settled on a figure of 150 to 200,000, but some say it was more like in the millions. 75 to 90% of those killed were women. The worst period of the killings was 1550 to 1650. This was a great time of transformation from the medieval to the early modern period, largely based on the shift from the feudalistic economy, the agrarian-based economy of subsistence living, to the early stages of capitalism. People were no longer just focused on working to fill their own needs or those of their overlord, but were involved in production for profit. Gender roles were shifting, and women were shut out of a lot of the new things, including the professional guilds, as well as women being shut out of working in the public workspace and resigned to the domestic. Protestantism was taking hold in Europe, and religious wars were devastating the lands. There were several years of drought and famine during this time. So cultural change and scarcity meant that communities were no longer willing to support the poor in the ways that they previously had. These changes disrupted many of the norms of society and created conditions that were ripe for the vicious, petty nature of humans to be expressed. As I said, the primary target of the witch hunts were women, but they were women who fell outside the gendered norms of the married domestic. They were widowed or unmarried, generally over 40, which was quite old in the Middle Ages. They had little protection or support, generally poor, social outcasts. Some were healers or midwives. Many of them defied gender norms of obedience and complacency by being outspoken or challenging. Think in terms of the words hag or shrew, or conjure up the image of the witch that is so prevalent now on Halloween and in our horror movies, the contorted crone. These were women that were outside of the normal gender, the gender norms for the era. So was there an organized effort to exterminate these women? Was this about the church trying to eradicate ancient healers or pagan practices? Yes and no. Witch burnings were primarily a rural event. There were no witch burnings in any of the major European cities. They arose out of the communities, out of their own accord, out of the energy of that community. The church recognized the opportunity to reinforce the power, reinforce the church's power, and provided the structure and the manual for how to identify and prosecute a witch. Really, There was a manual called The Witch's Hammer that created the justification for the witch burnings and laid out all the details for torture, prosecution, and execution. The church provided the infrastructure. The people provided the fear, the hate, and the scapegoating. So what's going on here? We know in times of upheaval, when things are not going well on a big scale, people look for reasons to explain their circumstances. Your baby dies, and it's unbearable to think that was a random event. So you accuse the midwife of casting a spell. Animals are dying, maybe because of the drought, but the village points the finger at the elderly women who seem to be meeting in a small group and nobody knows what they're doing. You find someone to blame for your problems and make them the scapegoat. Now, scapegoating is an ancient art that involved an actual goat. You wonder where that word came from. In the ancient religious sacrifice process, goats would be driven out of communities, drowned, or driven off cliffs to symbolically remove the sins and evils of the people. The term has been around for thousands of years, just like the actions of scapegoating itself. And the poverty and lack of power of the victims made them easy targets and scapegoats. In a typical situation, a poor woman might ask a neighbor for support, like communities had been supporting people in the past. And when it was denied, the poor woman would get angry or frustrated. Then the next time something befell the neighbor who had turned the woman away, the poor woman would get blamed. And there was an added layer of guilt here. Since people believed it was a sin not to be charitable, the guilt that the neighbor felt would be projected onto the poor woman, the convenient scapegoat. It's easier to blame someone than to hold on to your own uncomfortable feelings. Accusations then were spread to willing ears through gossip and innuendo. Someone would remember a similar problem that afflicted them and how that particular woman had been on the road just before it happened. You can see how this would snowball. Many of the early witch burnings resulted from the fear of the people who were trying to have a sense of control in times of upheaval. It was not part of an organized effort. We're just going to make that evil stuff go away and maybe things will go back to the way they were. And because of generalized anxiety, accusations of witchcraft would rile up the community and a mob mentality would take hold. Now, the Christian church capitalized on this opportunity to coalesce their own power by intentionally elevating the crimes of witchcraft from something that was unlawful or a nuisance to heresy or evil. They created the criteria that to qualify as a witch, you had to be in a pact with the devil. You had to have sex with the devil, which is kind of hard to figure out because the devil actually had no body. You had to wear the devil's mark, and you had to participate in heinous acts such as the killing and eating of children. These criteria reinforce the need to exterminate the witches, right? If somebody's doing something that horrible, you need to exterminate them and to make the people feel good and powerful, the triumph of good over evil. And of course, the witches had to be burned in order to purify their souls and protect us from evil. How inspiring and reassuring it must have been. It was a great distraction from the profound changes that were taking place in society. So in order to learn from this history, let's summarize what we've learned about why these witch hunts were happening. We find that humans had a need to scapegoat other people to project their problems onto others. Humans feel an urge to spread gossip and innuendo to reassure ourselves, to feel important, and that we're willing to go along with terrible acts when we believe that we are protecting ourselves or that we are on the side of good versus evil. We also learned that unease with change can lead societies to abuse the most weak and vulnerable, and that institutions will encourage and support the worst aspects of human nature if it allows them to consolidate and maintain power. Well, it's a good thing we don't do any of those things anymore, huh? So let's fast forward from medieval Europe to America in the mid-1950s, when the Red Scare was in full force. This was the effort that was led by Senator Joseph McCarthy to ferret out communists in the government and in organized labor, higher education, media, entertainment, wherever he could find them. Thousands of people lost their jobs and had their lives ruined by accusations. The hearings ran from 1954 to 56, but the government's effort to ferret out communism started right after World War II, before McCarthy was even a senator. McCarthy simply saw an opportunity to coalesce power as a senator and escalate the process. Like the witch hunts of the earlier era, one of the key features was requiring people to indict others. This reinforced power by making vulnerable people feel fearful. You could be next. If you don't rat somebody out, we're going to go after you. Hearsay and innuendo were considered evidence. I found a copy of an army pamphlet called How to Spot a Communist. It was issued in the early 50s. The tips include paying attention to the language. The preference for long sentences is common to most communist writings, Unitarian Universalists as well. And also be on the lookout for such hobbies as folk dancing and folk music, which have been traditionally allied with the communist movement in the United States. As absurd as that sounds, in the 1950s, it was no joke. So how did these witch hunts end? As you heard in the reading, the Salem witch trials ended with one man's courage to speak up and name the true evil. The McCarthy hearings started to wind up the month following when the hearings were broadcast to national television. After one particular series of accusations of an Army officer, a young Army officer, the defending counsel said the famous words, "Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency at long last? Have you no sense of decency?" This helped those who had been supporting the hearings to fully find their conscience. The final nail in the coffin was a television expose presented by Edward R. Murrow, a popular newscaster at the time. But there had to be cultural and institutional shifts that were happening for these courageous acts to take hold. The public kind of has to be primed to hear them. In Europe, the church stopped sponsoring the witch trials. They got what they wanted out of it. They'd coalesced their power, and they didn't really need them anymore. Skepticism took hold at the upper levels of society, and they encouraged changes in the laws and influenced popular opinion. And the witch hunts just simply lost their steam, especially when they were no longer encouraged by those in power. So what have we learned from this history that can illuminate our present? I'm sure some of you are already thinking of ways that these aspects of human nature are playing out in our culture right now. We are living in a time of great upheaval ourselves. And I really hope that we don't repeat some of the ugliness of the past, though in some ways we already are. Let's go over those human nature qualities again that are revealed. The witch hunts taught us that humans have a need to find a scapegoat for our problems, that we have an urge to spread gossip and innuendo to reassure ourselves and help us feel powerful, that we have a willingness to go along with terrible things if we think we are protecting ourselves or if we're on the right side, the side of good. And we learned that unease and change can lead societies to abuse the most weak and vulnerable among us. So who are the current scapegoats in our country? The ones that are blamed for everything that goes wrong and help make people feel powerful and in control? You can create the list just as well as I can. The immigrants, poor, transgender people, people of color, uppity women, always a popular group. An important part of the fuel for these kind of behaviors is gossip, innuendo, and hearsay. And social media, of course, is our new village square. I have been guilty of being influenced by the hyperbole, of passing on Facebook posts that support my righteous attitude against someone I disagree with, without checking the validity or the truth of the post, or even thinking about the implications of posting it, needlessly adding to the hysteria. How different am I from the neighbor spreading rumors about witches in medieval Europe? They thought they were on the side of goodness too. So where are the courageous people that we need now to remind us of the better sides of human nature? Perhaps I'm looking at them right now, here in our sanctuary, or those of you who are on Zoom. You know, courage can be in the not doing as well as in the doing. Can you refrain from the supercharged negativity on social media or passing on posts without verifying their truth? Gossip and innuendo move faster on social media than they ever did in the town square. Can you refrain from judging people who are different from you, look different, act different, look or think differently? Can you bring curiosity instead? And the courage can be in the doing, the speaking up, even in the small ways. If you hear someone scapegoating or spreading innuendo, can you say something? Even if it's simple as, wow, that's harsh. So do I think another witch hunt is possible? There are modern day witch hunts in many parts of the world right now, mob violence against people who are accused of witchcraft and blamed for the community problems. And there are witch hunts on social media as well, mob violence of a different kind, not fatal, but destructive of people's lives. We are living in a time of upheaval, and as people of goodwill and good intentions, one of our biggest responsibilities is to work on our resilience so that we don't make things worse. The world needs people who can be resilient in times of challenge, people who can live with discomfort and uncertainty without scapegoating or succumbing to mob thinking. Let's work together to be those kind of people. Let's work together to be the kind of people who come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. Blessed be. So may it be. Let's sing together for all that is our life. Please rise in body or spirit. To catch up. Okay, here we go. For all that is alive, we sing our praise. So, I want to connect those at home on Zoom with those here in the sanctuary. Those of us on the chancel can reach out. We know you're there, Zoom people, and we miss you. We want to be together. Oh, let us be people who help make this world a better place. Let us be people who can take care of our bodies and our spirits, take care and build our resilience so that we can be non-anxious presences in the world. We can be the people that are holding the peace. We can be the people who are making the difference by keeping us calm and centered and resilient. Let us go forth and live into the mission of this congregation to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen.
And for those of you at home on Zoom, we will say our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish our chalice flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.